Next guest, who's Hank Malik, a specialist in the field of knowledge management, who during his career has worked at PwC and IBM, the Carbon Trust and Deloitte, just to name a few. Hank's also a published author on knowledge management and holds the designations of Master Certified Knowledge Manager and Chartered Knowledge Manager as well, which is fantastic. And Hank will be talking about a blended approach to knowledge management, best practices and lessons learned. So welcome, Hank. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you with us.
Yes, hello there. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. You can see your slides as well. So all over to you. Thank you, Hank.
Excellent. We're in business. Excellent. Good. So thanks very much for inviting me along today. Let me just go to the first slide there. So what I'm going to do is take you on a journey around best practices and lessons learned. It's something which I've been heavily focused on for a number of years. I've been in knowledge management for over 15 years, and it's something which I have a real passion for. Started in consultancy and then went on to lead my own knowledge management teams around the world. And I've just come back now from beautiful Oman in the Middle East, where I was leading KM for the oil and gas company and set up my own consultancy. And this is a story about sharing lessons learned from the energy fields, but I think it could be applicable to the service desk industry about just good habits when we take on lessons learned. And hopefully I'll make it quite engaging for you. So there's me. So just to prove that I've really got a big bug for knowledge management, I've even actually got the title in my name. So there you go. So I'm looking around connecting, collecting, and collaborating. So I come from quite a purist KM perspective. So what I offer, it can be equally valuable across multiple sectors. So let's kick off then about lessons learned. And this is a slide which has been used for a number of years, but it's got a lot of reality around what do we do with lessons learned. Now, I know it's probably really critical in the service desk industry, and I know there are quite a few maybe automated tools to capture this, but really, when I look back at my career and I look back at how people have actually delivered, managed lessons learned, this picture actually isn't that far off the truth. It's something which we either capture begrudgingly at the end of an incident or the end of a project, and it's stored away. It was stored away before in files, now in tools such as SharePoint, which can't be applied. So the critical aspect around lessons learned is you need to be able to apply it. Otherwise, that's called a lesson identified. And I'm going to share with you some of the pros and cons of doing it, some of the experiences I've had, which may help you if it's something you're interested to take forward in knowledge management. So a couple of definitions, because again, when I normally start off a conference, I ask the audience what the definition of knowledge management is, and you ask. There's an old adage which says you ask 5 knowledge managers what it is, you'll get 5 different answers. Probably very similar for lessons learned. These are a couple of ones I picked up which try to capture the essence around a lesson learned is a good practice. It's an innovative practice. It's something that's worked and it's something that should be shared. And the second one from the IFAD is it has to improve future actions. Otherwise, the lesson learned is actually quite redundant. So it's got to be able to support processes, support best practices for future interactions. Now, again, another definition of this is from a good colleague of mine, Stan Garfield. If those of you who are interested to learn more about knowledge management, he is one of the real gurus in knowledge management. I worked virtually with him when I was at Deloitte, and he's got an incredible amount of content, which is around the subject. But it's around, actually, when we look at lessons learned, it's around capturing it at key stages in an incident or a project or any activity. So what we see here is around capturing it at the beginning of a project or stage or incident. And that's what we call in the oil and gas industry, we call that learning before. So before we start another initiative, project development cycle, learn what has happened before and capture that. We then go through a process of learning during and learning after. And I love his explanation around lessons learned, and it's very much, it's something that we tried, maybe it worked, it didn't work, how can we avoid the problems before, and equally important is how we capture those insights and nuggets. So I know in a lot of service desk knowledge customer services tools, there are now databases, which is great, but I'm probably more focused on how we capture those learnings and capturing both the tacit and explicit. Something else you ought to think about, probably hopefully during the day, is that when you think of knowledge management, you need to think of it as an all-encompassing framework. It's something which it can be quite intangible to explain, and this is a simple framework I've designed and I've used in a number of applications, and with a recent book I wrote with a ex-colleague of mine, Jordan Richards. It's very much looking at KM as components, building blocks. So I think we have a couple of speakers later on talking about data, information. It's absolutely critical. Collaborations of communities, network, forums. Expertise, I think we spoke about that earlier on, about access to subject matter experts. And then the area I'm focusing on is around learnings, best practices. And then beneath that, you need to have enablers. So I think we spoke in the last section about you need to have enablers to allow people to share knowledge. You have to create a knowledge sharing environment, supporting behaviors, because you'll get that adage of what's in it for me. So really look at it, making it an engaging process, offer incentives, offer different approaches to knowledge sharing, and that's supported by technology. And I think one of the sections towards the end of the day is around digital, which I'm quite excited to join in or to listen to. It's about digital transformation. So think about KM, and if you can explain it on a page, even better. Okay, so when we look at lessons learned, you have this concept about learning before, during, and after. And this has come from the oil and gas sector, and it's very much aimed at learning before is aimed at actually, what has this work been done before? Have we had client work? Has this incident occurred before? You then capture it during learning during. So don't just do lessons learned at the end of a project or an incident or an activity. It's got to be a continuous loop of learning behind this as we go forward. Just take that out of there. No, don't want to do that. And then learning after is about doing the retrospects at the end of a project or the end of an activity. And these slides were some of the work I developed earlier. And also another great source, if you're interested in KM, is there's a lot of freeware out there. And again, a tip for you is the work from Health Education England, NHS. They've got some amazing amount of material which comes back from the old NHS libraries. But if you were interested in knowledge management, I advise you to go to that site, because you'll pick up a lot of hints, tools, methods, which will help get you kicked off in KM. Okay, so let's go on to really about turning knowledge into action. So when we kicked off lessons learned, it's absolutely critical that you need board level support for knowledge management in general. And I actually argue the case that if you don't get it, maybe it's not the right time to be doing knowledge management. So get the executive board, identify the drivers. So in the oil and gas sector, there were three drivers for lessons learned and knowledge management, and that was to safeguard our people, keep them safe. That's health and safety. It's keeping our assets safe and keeping the environment safe. So coming from Oman, where it's currently about 55 degrees, 120 degrees in the heat there, it's keeping our assets in the field safe. It's keeping our people safe and the environment, indeed, from pollution and oil spills. Another drive is, has the same incident been repeating? Because if it has, then you need to capture the learnings of why that's happening to ensure it doesn't happen again. Do we need to reduce costs, time, operational process safety? In the oil and gas, it's critical. So again, with my team, when I've run lessons learned, it's if we can get that real evidence being shown, it's a great win for knowledge management and for lessons learned. And sharing between projects, and also maximizing our expertise, because at the end of the day, the expertise, learnings sit with our people. So they're our single most asset. And also the final one there is, particularly in the Gulf sector and the oil and gas sector, is a lot of expertise is now retiring. I think something like 50% will be retiring within the next, I think it's the next 3 years. So all that knowledge that's walking out the door, it's critical we need to capture those learnings while they're still with us. So what about the issues? So when you're looking at lessons learned, there could be multiple approaches to lessons learned. So I found in organizations there's no consistency. So engineers, SMEs, they like spreadsheets, and there's a lot of skepticism about, we've tried this before, and that's synonymous with knowledge management. We tried knowledge management, and 80% of times you could have some struggles to achieve real benefits, or we don't have the time to do this. The other critical element I find that when we're doing this is you need to understand the engineering technical language, or in the customer services world, it's the language of the business. You need to understand that language and have SMEs on the team, which will allow you to capture the content. And the final one, what are the benefits? And this is one which I've been asked many times over my career, is how do we quantify the benefits of lessons learned and knowledge management? And that's absolutely critical, because at the end of the day, in these tough times, you need to be able to show real value being delivered, and to show the bottom line. And I can give some tips on that, certainly. So the approach we adopted was we got leadership, project leadership buy-in. It's absolutely critical. And select your projects, or select the incidents with care. Don't, again, this is something advice I give, is don't take a top-down big brother approach to knowledge management. It's better to be selective in areas where there is a real opportunity, such as a function, for knowledge sharing, as opposed to a big brother approach, because that's shown many times before that that'll fail if you try to steamroll a knowledge project initiative. You need to prioritize the real learnings and insights, because not all learnings are valuable. So you need to have subject matter experts to validate that learning, that it's a critical element behind that. You need supporting guidance, policies, training behind this. When I've rolled this out, I've trained my knowledge management teams to be able to deliver something called lessons learned workshops, which we're now doing more virtually, of course, but we actually asked the 3 questions about what worked, what didn't work, and how can we improve things. And we run those as virtual workshops. So if there was a major incident, or maybe a major best practice, a major win, we try to capture what were the key drivers to achieving real success in that. Having a technical expert, as I mentioned, and also really important with lessons learned and knowledge management is creating that buzz, because it is a change management transformation thing. So it needs to have a real push on branding, publication. So if you're lucky enough to have a knowledge management team, or I advise that one of them becomes a knowledge communications manager, who be specifically focused on things such as the portal, blogs, wikis, newsletters, and create that feeling of a real togetherness as we take knowledge management on the route going forward. So technology we used, and I think on the last presentation there, was SharePoint, and we use SharePoint with Microsoft.NET. It's a tool which has been around now, and it's quite established in the knowledge-based environment, but there are other technologies, and there's some freeware which probably is equally supportive of that. You need to create the concept of a learning knowledge base. So in my last organization, we created something called the LKB, Learning Knowledge Base, and it became synonymous with knowledge management and lessons learned. And as we communicated, promoted it, it became, I call it our killer application, where you go to upload your learnings. And we made it that's user-friendly, that anyone could upload a learning, and that with very little processes. If you introduce too process-based too early on, you'll kill and stifle any spontaneity to uploading learnings. So everyone in the organization, if they had a learning, it was applicable to be uploaded into the learning base. And that's absolutely clear. But then within that, we had a verification process for approval of learnings, and it went through a certain workflow steps so that a knowledge manager, subject matter expert would approve it. And if it was destined to be that successful a learning, it became a best practice, and that went into our best practice section of the learning knowledge base. Search is absolutely critical. It has to be easily searchable. So when we capture learnings across the organization, try to encourage authors' content to tag it with keywords. It just helps with search, but keep the tagging quite simple and quite effective. And then, of course, having reporting on performance is critical. So you can start to manage this. And this is really when we really started to get success. There were 2 projects I remember that were having challenges. I got the project directors together with their teams. We bounced ideas out. We tried to identify why Project A was 6 months ahead of Project B and was saving cost savings of some $600 million cost savings. And it came down to using maybe contractors, vendors, particular cladding materials for piping. We got the project teams, engineers together talking. Project B took on those learnings and saved, as I said, in the region of half a million dollars of cost savings. And that was the real aha moment, that lessons learned and knowledge management was really creating value behind this. So we created some snapshots, some knowledge cards, very simple, on a page, what the issue was, who the project team was, the benefits achieved, and the bottom line. And I call these knowledge cards. They became so successful, we distributed them across the organization, and again, that became synonymous with lessons learned and knowledge management. And again, this concept I told you about actually having a communications and having a branding behind this. So the benefits achieved, this gives you just a quick snapshot of some of the benefits by doing a really good lessons learned approach. If you introduce that into knowledge management. The key element is about repeating the same incidents. Again, in oil and gas, that's absolutely critical, because if an incident is costing millions of dollars in oil spills or damages to the environment or to our people, we want to stop those incidents repeating again. If the learnings are that critical that it can actually improve the processes, then again, that's a major win. So by a particular learning, we managed to update standard operating procedures, reduce time on projects, reduce time on cost savings and avoidance. And coming on from this then, our learning knowledge base became that successful that we applied and we won global recognition for our lessons learned and knowledge management tool. And that's something which, again, maybe not we don't have time today, but if it's something that's of interest, is talking about KM certification for both training of our staff, our people, but also the organization, applying for global knowledge management awards. So the award I'm talking about here is called the MIKE Award, M-I-K-E, which is the most innovative knowledge enterprise. It's a global standard which anyone can apply for via regions. If you have if you're proud of a knowledge management or lesson learned or an innovation project, you can then go forward to a global shortlist, and it just gives real credence to both yourself, the organization, that you're doing global best practices in knowledge management. I'm now happy to take that offline and give advice on that. So again, the other concept there was around learnings, expertise, and reduction and duplication of effort. But again, this is now being superseded now with what's the really exciting opportunity of artificial intelligence and digitalization. The two are coming very much closer together now. So I see a real convergence of knowledge management with digital transformation. And in fact, some of the big knowledge management organizations I talk to are now calling themselves knowledge and digital transformation organizations. And here, or I think where the tools which can help us in lessons learned here is particularly around cognitive search, machine learning, smart searching. So for example, on a knowledge base of some 15,000 learnings, if you have smart crawlers that can identify trends in learnings and then start to shape them, I think we have huge opportunities to reduce the amount of the amount of human effort needed, and to start to pick out key trends and key themes. So I'm a great advocate for this. It's still early days yet, but I think there's some real exciting opportunities for us in the knowledge management world. And then finally, the takeaways. I think start with a clear need. If you're going to kick off a knowledge management and lessons learned project, absolutely do it because there is a real need. I've seen many failed attempts because either people can't articulate the need, they can't articulate the business case, or there isn't executive sponsorship. So those things absolutely need to be in place. We need to communicate what are lessons learned. It's got to be clearly identified. There has to be a real value in what we're doing behind that. Have a framework. Have the concept of a KM framework. It can help in so many ways when you're explaining this. There's this concept of a 15-second elevator pitch. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before. So just explain knowledge management in 15 seconds on one slide. If you can do that, then you're on the way to achieving some real success. The ultimate goal there is to create real valuable knowledge assets. These are real assets which we can publish, we can print, we can share, of the value being achieved, and that supporting the processes. And I mentioned having a killer knowledge-based app. It's absolutely critical behind this. And then really promote the benefits being achieved. Create awards. There was a vogue a couple of years ago about having a November. I know it sounds a little bit corny. So that's KNOW, Vember. But most organizations, a lot of organizations are now doing this. Have it as a knowledge month and have knowledge sharing events, marketplaces, stalls, ask the expert, create a buzz around that. And then again, celebrate success, both internally and externally. So I think that's my takeaway, and you can contact me on hankmalik@gmail.com, and I'm happy to bounce ideas off and give you any advice that you're looking for. And hope you enjoyed my short presentation.
Fantastic, thank you, Hank. That was some really great sage stuff there. Actually, we've got a couple of questions come through. I've got a load, but I don't think we're going to have time to answer them. But there is one specifically from Mercy, which ties into one of the questions I was going to ask about quantifying the value. Right. So I think what you mentioned about the knowledge cards, the value, the value, explaining the value in knowledge cards and how you share that. So Hank's question is, so Mercy's question is, how did he quantify the value of lessons learned to engineers in response to the comment, we already do this? So there is a culture thing there, absolutely, but certainly sort of articulating the value through those knowledge cards. Could you just go over that?
Yep, sure. So all of this came from the directors, the project engineers themselves. So we were just facilitators behind this. So the way we did this was at the end of each project closeout or incident closeout, it was mandatory to do a lesson learned. So everybody had to go to the lessons learned knowledge base and either upload or review learnings. And then this was supported with a lessons learned workshop, which I ran. And we had one specific remit was around value for each stage. So, and it was led by the project directors. So we were nothing more than facilitators for this. So we had to clearly articulate around value. And one really useful tool you can use that we used, it's been around for a number of years, the Kaplan and Norton balance scorecard. It's a very simple process. You can Google it. It follows 4 trajectories for capturing value. One is on a organization, people learning side. One is on a customer services side, financial, and then individual personal learnings. And for each one of those, there are metrics. So a lot of the metrics I took for this comes from the human capital management world. So within that, there's many metrics. I think the region of some 300 human capital management metrics, which includes things such as value, skills development, learning, cost efficiencies, and just use that. Don't create another KM metrics. Use what's already there, but then have it quantifiable. So the killer value that we achieved was when it was real cost savings, because at that stage, the oil and gas sector, and still today, is going through a huge cost-cutting exercise. So anything that was reducing costs but maintaining value and knowledge assets was critical. So the answer to the question is there: get your experts to create to capture the value behind that.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And I've got loads of questions actually. Certainly in relation to the oil and gas industry, the sort of the whistleblowing culture, the culture of trying to protect each other by bringing stuff to the surface, and the relationship between risk and knowledge, and I would have loved to expand that on that, and sort of understand if they are a slightly different breed or if it's exactly the same in other organizations from the perspective of cultures. But I don't think we're going to get the time, unfortunately, Hank. Maybe next time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The oil and gas sector, energy sector is risk averse. Yep. So it's to do things safer, cost effectively, a lot of compliance, a lot of regulatory compliance behind this. So absolutely making sure we're on track and doing the right things is critical for that.
Yeah, I agree. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, Hank. That was fantastic stuff. Hopefully we'll get another chance to do this again at some point soon. Until then, thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good. Okay, so before we sort of move on then, we've got another listener poll. So if we can just run that, please, Holly, and you'll see the question there is in relation to knowledge manager, the role, right? Does your organization employ a dedicated practice or process owner responsible for knowledge management in IT? So yes, we have a knowledge management in IT. No, we don't have a knowledge management manager in IT, but also